were many are all washed away since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Floods of joy o'er my soul like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. I'm possessed of a hope that is steadfast and sure. Since Jesus came into my heart. And no dark clouds of doubt now my pathway obscure. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Floods of joy o'er my soul like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. There's a light in the valley of death now for me. Since Jesus came into my heart. And the gates of the city beyond I can see. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Floods of joy o'er my soul like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. I shall go there to dwell in that city I know. Since Jesus came into my heart. And I'm happy, so happy as onward I go. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Since Jesus came into my heart. Floods of joy o'er my soul like the sea billows roll. Since Jesus came into my heart. Stuck with me ever since. David, though he was God's chosen king over Israel, and though he had slayed Goliath, and he was to be, Samuel had anointed him, and he had God's blessings, he still faced so many things before he could take over that throne, before he could take over those blessings that God had promised him. Saul, who had been God's favorite at one point and disobeyed him, was mad at David and sought to kill him. And David had to go on the run, had to be in exile out of his own country. The place where he'd grown up, and the very king of that country was after him, wanted his head. But David escaped, and God watched over him. And what I read in 1 Samuel, David and his men were on the run at one point. And they had no weapons. They had to leave in such haste that they had no weapons and they had no provisions. And they came upon a temple. And David asked the priests, he said, "Do you have anything here that we could eat?" They said, "Well, we don't have anything but the holy bread behind the tree." And they asked God. God said, "Give it to him." And then before they left, David didn't even have time to grab his sword. And David said, "I know," I'm paraphrasing here, he said, "I know this is a temple and you really don't have any reason to be keeping swords around here." He said, "But would you happen to have anything I could use?" And the priest said, "All we have is this sword from Goliath, the Philistine. That same sword that David had took off of him when he slayed him as a young man. The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah. Behold, it is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. And if thou wilt take it, for there is no other save that here." And David said, "There is none like that. Give it here." Yeah. He said, "Boy, if I'm going to take a sword, I'm going to take that one. If there's a sword ever that I've proved God with, it's that one." Yeah. Because that was the sword that Goliath, all I had was a little slingshot and a rock. He had that great big sword. My goodness, if God has ever been on a weapon, it's been on that one. David said, give me that one. Yeah. So those blessings that David laid up, he used them again and again and again. Yeah. It's like when we talk about Goliath, it wasn't good enough that he went back to Saul and said, yeah, he's dead. He took his head with him.
Yeah, he did.
And
it's a testimony.
But those testimonies, they're important to lay up.
Yeah.
I taught that Sunday school one time, and Sunday school lesson one time, and I still think of it so often. There was a good reason why God had to make the Ark of the Covenant. It wasn't just a pretty box for him to carry around from place to place, but it was there where God himself dwelt. He was so specific of how it was made, and he was also specific about the things that they had put in it. They called it the Ark of the Covenant, but I like that they called it the Ark of the Testimony too. Because in that box, anywhere they went, it went first. And it contained that manna that God had sent them from heaven. And it contained that rod that had bloomed, that old dead piece of wood that had brought forth fruit. It was a testimony that was ever before them. And I think of it so often. If I could just keep my testimonies out in front of me, instead of somewhere in a back closet somewhere, if that's what goes in front of me, I'm going to do all right. It doesn't matter what anything comes up against me, as long as I keep those testimonies in front of me. I'm looking at victory before I've even got to the battle.
Amen.
Amen.
Yes.
Bless the Lord.
Bless you, Zach.